Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, where today Alpha Centaurus finds himself in a Tier 10 arms race battle here on the Islands of Ice map in the British Tier 8 battleship HMS Monarch. It's not a premium ship, this is a tech tree ship, anybody can grind this out, but he is a Tier 8 battleship in a Tier 10 arms race battle. And I guess the point of today's video is just to show that you don't have to be the biggest dog in the yard to have the biggest effect on the outcome of the battle. As the American writer Mark Twain is often quoted as saying, "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog." Now, I should probably get this out of the way right at the start. The Monarch is not a particularly good ship. I mean, it's not a particularly bad ship. But nobody's ever going to tell you with a straight face that the Monarch is a great ship. It's not. I like the Monarch though, but I don't like it because of how good it is. I mean, I love the TOG 2 in World of Tanks, and it's a terrible tank. But liking something and it being good are not always the same thing. I mean, there are people who like the Churchill gun carrier, and it's arguably the worst tank in the game. The Monarch is definitely not the worst Tier 8 battleship. Well, I mean, I'm sure there are some people out there who think it is. But it's not objectively terrible. It does have a lot of limitations, however. Now would probably actually be a good time to go through the pros and cons. We'll go through the pros first. Don't worry, this won't take too long. And quoting directly from the Monarch's wiki page, main battery has a quick reload time of only 25 seconds, so that's good. It has good belt armor that offers decent citadel protection when angled. Here you can see the good medium-range anti-aircraft bubble in effect. Although it should be noted that since the battle has just started, he's not the only one shooting at all of these aircraft. And some of these kills that you're seeing popping up were not actually the strike aircraft. They were the patrol fighters that the strike aircraft left orbiting. And patrol fighters, while they count as aircraft kills, are virtually meaningless aircraft kills because they have no health, they have no armor, and they are very, very easy to shoot down. The benefit of those patrol fighters, and of course the strike aircraft that dropped them in the first place, is not so much the damage that they do directly, but of course the spotting that they do. And that brings us on to the next good thing about the Monarch. It has best-in-tier battleship concealment. With a full concealment build, you can get the stealth on this thing down to 11.5 kilometers. And that's kind of critical for the Monarch, because the stealth is really the only absolutely good thing about this ship, which we'll see when we come to the list of bad things about the Monarch. And of course, when you're in a carrier battle, your stealth becomes largely irrelevant. So, yeah. Good times. Are there any other good things about the Monarch? There are, not many. She's got a high fire chance with her high explosive shells. And she also has an enhanced repair party consumable, which allows her to repair up to 75% of normal penetration damage. And that's it. Now onto the list of bad things. This might take us slightly longer. And again, I'm quoting directly from the World of Warships wiki page here. The gun dispersion is worse than her German counterpart, the Bismarck. She has a very tall superstructure, which you can quite plainly see, which will attract and eat a lot of damage. She has pitiful gun range that even some cruisers outrange. I'm going to take issue with that one. I mean, yeah, the default range of the guns with the standard fire control is only 17.6 kilometers? 17.9 kilometers, that's pretty bad. But with the upgraded fire control, the guns can range out to nearly 20 kilometers, 19.6. And that's fine. Oh, that Minotaur's just made a serious error of judgment. Alpha Centauri didn't quite give enough. I mean, he judged that the Minotaur was going to start backing up. But he just didn't quite give enough lead to score some devastating hits there. Oh, here's something I want to show you. The torpedo bombers from the Malta are coming in. At about 15:48 on the clock, his anti-aircraft guns open up. Watch this. Bear in mind that one of the good things on the World of Warships wiki page listed about the Monarch was her good medium-range anti-aircraft bubble. Now, to be fair, one of the bad things about the Monarch is its weak long-range anti-aircraft bubble, but for the next more than a minute, the long-range anti-aircraft guns are not going to be the issue. So that Malta just got a full strike off with its first attacking flight, all 4 torpedoes. The AA guns, and of course he's spotted, so he's getting spammed continuously. He's suffering a double fire at the moment, but he's holding on to the damage control in case he takes a flood here. He's already burned his first repair party consumable. There's a second full strike of torpedo bombers. Under continuous anti-aircraft fire, here comes the third strike, and it's only 3 torpedoes. For more than a minute, his anti-aircraft guns, and remember, this ship is supposed to have a good medium-range anti-aircraft bubble, and for more than a minute, those anti-aircraft guns were firing continuously, and they prevented 1 torpedo out of 12 from being dropped. A ship that is described as having good medium-range AA fired for more than a minute with reinforced AA sectors up and shot down 1 aircraft. But Jingles, you can quite clearly see he shot down more than 1 aircraft. Yeah, patrol fighters. Patrol fighters are irrelevant. They have no health, they have no armour. They melt under anti-aircraft fire, and they don't matter. The aircraft that actually mattered, the attacking squadron of torpedo bombers, endured more than a minute of good medium-range anti-aircraft fire and suffered 1 casualty in the third and final attacking flight. This is what good medium-range anti-aircraft firepower looks like in World of Warships right now. And that wasn't even a Russian carrier. Remember, Russian carriers attack with everything at once, with the justification being damage done to the attacking flight, since all of the aircraft in the squadron from a Russian carrier form the attacking flight. Damage done to the attacking flight actually matters. But if they're all attacking at once, they wouldn't be in the AA bubble long enough for you to actually do any damage to them. If that had been a Russian carrier, he wouldn't have shot any down. He would have eaten everything. Yeah, this is fine. This is anti-aircraft defences working as intended as far as World of Warships is concerned. Man. Yes, I know, I'm fake laughing. Only the tears are real. Anyway, let's finish going through the list of bad things about HMS Monarch. So we've described they said pitiful gun range. I disagree with that. She is, however, only armed with 15-inch guns, just like the Bismarck, also at Tier 8. And they don't quite have the same punch as most of her other Tier 8 contemporaries. Most of the damage from this ship, even though Alpha Centaurus has mostly been loading armor-piercing here, generally speaking, most of the damage output from a Monarch will come from the high explosive shells. Although the armor-piercing can be good against cruisers. But against battleships, you'd better be at point-blank range and have a flat broadside to shoot at, otherwise you're going to be seeing a lot of bouncers. Against a cruiser like the Azuma over there, however, well, let's see. He's got the armor-piercing loaded, let's see how it performs. Now, the range isn't ideal. The Monarch's guns do have kind of bad dispersion, not even as good as the Bismarck's. But his stealth of 11.5 kilometers is what's allowing him the option of picking and choosing the moment of his attack here. And this is a good thing about the Monarch, as long as you're not being spotted by aircraft from carriers, of course. But his best-in-tier stealth does allow him the luxury of waiting to pick the perfect moment to shoot at the Azuma. Unfortunately, he spent so long waiting for the perfect moment to shoot at the Azuma that the Azuma was able to stealth up. But that's okay. He just has to get a little closer. He actually has better stealth than the Azuma, which is a cruiser. Monarch has best-in-tier stealth for a battleship. So he picked what was probably the best possible moment to fire. The Azuma was given about as much broadside as it was going to give. 9 shots fired, 2 hits. They were both penetrations, at least there were no bouncers. I mean, I'd feel cheated if I was firing 15-inch armor-piercing shells at a cruiser, given mostly a flat broadside and I got any kind of bouncers. The quick reload, however, is on his side. That's more like it. A Citadel. That Azuma just got spanked, and now he's finding out just exactly how much fun it is to be interacting with enemy aircraft carriers. Oh, that Azuma's just making a whole series of remarkably bad decisions. I mean, catching himself broadside onto a Monarch wasn't his fault, the Monarch out-stealthed him. But then he reversed off the rocks, still given a flat broadside, and now he's inching forward, still given a flat broadside. Alpha's managed to get the rear turret unmasked, shots out. Difficult to get that rear turret pointing at a target without exposing an uncomfortable amount of your own broadside. One hit only, not enough to sink him, but he's managed to get the front turrets reloaded again extremely quickly. There's his first kill of the match. One Azuma down. Or is it pronounced Azuma? You know what? I don't really know. I also don't really care. Everybody knows which ship I'm talking about. Should probably talk quickly about the fact that this is an arms race battle. So, if you're wondering what all of the icons at the top of the screen mean, these are various different buffs that the team have collected. Here we go. And you do often see ridiculous damage numbers in an arms race battle specifically because of this reason, because usually there's a finite amount of health that can be farmed for damage on the enemy team, but in an arms race battle, teams can pick up buffs that will increase the maximum amount of hit points that the ships have. They will pick up hit point regeneration buffs, so they're passively healing damage continuously, whether or not they're using their repair party consumable. In fact, some of the ships may not even have repair party consumables, but if the team have picked up a hit point regeneration buff, they're going to heal slowly anyway. So there's more hit points around available to be farmed, which is often why, if you ever see the damage record for a particular ship, it's usually going to be in an arms race battle. Another feature of arms race battles, at the moment everybody's basically just fighting each other and trying to get possession of these buffs as they get airdropped. But there's also what's known as the key area, which will appear a certain length of time into the battle, and whoever captures this is basically going to win. And it's here where we see... hang on a second. Wait for it. Some of the shots clip the island. Yeah. 15-inch Monarch, armor piercing. It's not great. But if you have a look, you'll see that there's a timer, which this is a particular replay feature whenever you're watching an arms race replay. It's a little bit bugged. The timer at the top of the screen there is telling us that in slightly more than 54 years, the key area will become available for capture. Oh, that's more like it. Come on, baby. Daddy needs a new pair of shoes. Yes! Yeah, the armor piercing on this ship isn't fantastic. But at that kind of range, even the Monarch's going to find it hard to miss and penetrate and do damage. Oh dear, your guns are all pointing the wrong way, aren't they? I think, yep, there we go. That was a spanking, and kill number 2. He's now up to 115,000 damage. Remember, he's only tier 8, and he's not a particularly good tier 8, and this is a tier 10 arms race battle. Actually, we haven't even finished extolling the list of bad things about the Monarch. We only got about 2/3 of the way through. So where were we? Oh yes, very bad firing angles on that rear turret. The ship's firepower consists of 9 15-inch guns, and as we've seen, the armor-piercing shells are not fantastic. But it can only really safely fire 6 of those 9 15-inch guns without inviting a massive spanking in return. And that's due to the lousy firing angles on that rear turret. At least when you're firing forward. When you're firing to the rear, like this, the firing angles are actually pretty good on all 3 turrets. And while the accuracy of the guns is questionable, and the armor-piercing performance is suspect, as you can see, that was terrible. Okay, the front turrets didn't clear the island, but the rear turret did. But the Republic just didn't give a shit. And it's not a particularly well-armoured battleship either. And Alpha Centaurus is now in trouble, caught in a 3-way crossfire between a Republic, the Dmitry Donskoy, and that Colbert. And the absolute last thing he wants to do at this kind of range is run into that Republic. Fortunately, the Richthofen takes him out, although he had already committed to angling against the Republic's guns, which led to him running into the island there, which, if the Richthofen had not taken out the Republic, would probably have been the only thing that was going to save his life. His shitty accuracy strikes again, basically completely missing against the extremely lightly armoured Dmitry Donskoy. Speaking of lightly armoured, here comes the French cruiser, the Colbert. I thought trying to make sense of what the Colbert's doing. Because you don't want to be giving broadside to a battleship at that kind of range in a cruiser, even if that battleship is the Monarch. I thought for a second, because it's the only thing that made any sense of what I just watched the Colbert do, that maybe he was lining up for a torpedo attack run, but the Colbert doesn't have torpedoes. Alpha Centaurus lines up a second salvo against the Dmitry Donskoy, who was given a nice big flat broadside, but surprisingly, while it did a lot of armour-piercing chunk damage, no citadels were scored. What is the reload on his guns now? Because I'm pretty sure he must be running... Is he running Adrenaline Rush? He's down to a 15-second reload. Yeah, with the amount of damage that he's sustained, these are basically 15-inch machine guns now. Of course, they're still 15-inch machine guns with questionable accuracy and shitty armour-piercing penetration, particularly against battleships like the Bismarck over there. Yes, if you're going to load armour-piercing in this thing, shoot at cruisers. Oh, the Richthofen's taken out the Dmitry Donskoy. Okay, you have to shoot at the Bismarck, but honestly, high explosive would be better here. Although it is unusual to see somebody, because, I mean, there are definitely circumstances when the AP is your best choice. I'm just not sure that it's been the best choice throughout the entire course of this battle. I feel like he'd be doing more damage against a target like the Bismarck if he had the high explosive loaded. But since the Bismarck is now the last surviving ship on the enemy team, and we did a fair amount of AP chunk damage there, you're never going to citadel a Bismarck at that kind of range, certainly not with the Monarch's shitty armour-piercing shells. But I suspect his priority at the moment is to just not die to the Bismarck. Although, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't really matter if he dies to the Bismarck now or not. The enemy team only have 75 points left. And even if the Bismarck was to kill him, and it won't because he's got line of sight blocked, and is actually able to get some shots over the island there. But it's all over for the Bismarck. The Richthofen is just playing with him. I mean, the Bismarck's another battleship that's supposed to have good AA. We've all seen how much that matters. Yeah, it doesn't. And yeah, there's no way he's surviving this one. The best the Bismarck can hope for is to maybe do a bit more damage, get a bit more experience, because that is game over. So that was the Monarch. We didn't even get to the full list of bad things about this ship before the battle ended. I suppose for the sake of completeness, we should probably cover that. There are only two other things to talk about. We've talked about the bad firing angles on the rear turret. Also, hull plating. On the thin side for Tier 8 battleships, with 32mm of plating, making her extremely vulnerable to light cruisers with the IFHE skill, and heavy cruisers with or without it, although most heavy cruisers wouldn't have it because they don't need it. Combine that with a relatively small hit point pool does make this ship very fragile, with only really the concealment, which is best in tier for a Tier 8 battleship, making the whole thing workable, allowing you the luxury of being able to pick and choose your fights. As long as there isn't an aircraft carrier around. And there was. And finally, not a particularly agile ship, despite having a good rudder shift, and yet despite that he was able to avoid most of the torpedoes that the enemy HMS Malta attempted to drop on him, despite the fact that his good medium-range AA was almost completely useless. So, there you go. The Monarch. Not a terrible ship, but definitely not a good one either. And yet, despite all of those limitations, despite the fact that Alpha Centaurus was in a fairly mediocre Tier 8 battleship in a Tier 10 arms race battle, and only got 3 kills, and didn't set a record for the highest damage ever scored in the Monarch, that's what a 3,100 base experience game in this ship can look like. If you're any good, and you get just that tiny little bit lucky as well. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.